Welcome to the podcast, man. Excited to have you here.
Dude, this is great. This is so fun, man. Like you've been talking about a podcast forever. I feels like we've talked about it, together too. And dude, it's awesome to be here. I really appreciate it, man. This is cool.
Thanks, Dalton. No, I'm excited. You've been someone I've literally been at the top of my list of people to have on the podcast, someone that's mentored me and really helped me kind of figure out what are the first steps, which is why I thought you'd be a helpful person because since starting, I'm sure you had the same thing when you started, but I've had a lot of people who are like, hey, like, how did you do that? And it's like, I didn't even know that other people wanted to do it. It's just, I started doing it. All of a sudden I have like 5 or 6 friends who are also interested in starting a podcast.
Yeah, dude, it's amazing how it kind of spreads, right? Like, and there's no shortage of them anymore. I think that's kind of the cool thing that podcasting did was kind of like democratized this kind of newscast and letting people express themselves. And so podcasting is definitely a good tool to have in your belt.
For sure. And well, I think you just passed, what is it, 300 episodes?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, today we released 324. So
goodness, that's incredible.
Yeah, man. It's been a long time.
Cool. Well, dude, I want to get into your story because it's really cool. But before we do that, could you just give me a quick intro for the guests?
Yeah, dude. Absolutely. So I am currently the director of sales for a SaaS company. I've been in sales and marketing for over a decade. A big portion of that, the last couple of years, has been B2B podcasting, like how to monetize that and use that in a sales team and in a marketing strategy. And then, I've also in the last, maybe year, been on a little kick of going to youth groups, teaching the youth emotional resilience, which is something that we talk about in sales a lot. So it was an easy translation. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell, dude. Been in sales and marketing my whole time. I have a bachelor's in accounting, MBA in finance and strategy, and realized that I didn't want to be in finance or accounting. I got into sales to pay for that degree, right? And then just realized that, and then I tried to take an accounting job and it was like, dude, I can take a pay cut, but not that big of a pay cut. And so that was it, dude. But it's nice to have that background because then I can talk to people about finance. I have a little bit of credibility in the accounting and finance space to talk about those kinds of things. So it's nice. But other than that, dude, I coach wrestling for my son. I do jujitsu as a hobby and podcasting and hang out with cool people like you, dude.
No shortage of hobbies for Dalton Jensen. Dude, that's incredible.
Too busy. Right.
Yeah. No, yeah, some of that stuff I didn't even know about you, even like the emotional resilience. I saw you post about it on LinkedIn today. And I think that's an important thing, especially for sales, just not getting too high or too low, being able to just stay even keel and still push hard through everything. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Temperance, man. That's the name of the game right there for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Well, dude, I wanted to have you on to learn really how to get into podcasting, how to grow your side hustles through that. You've obviously done that. I'm excited to hear some of the cool stories. But before we jump into that, can you tell me just how you got into sales?
Yeah, dude. I got into sales. I served in LDS mission in St. George, Utah. I'm from Iowa originally. So my
small town.
Yeah, exactly. Small town in Iowa. My Polynesian family found their way into a small town in the Midwest because my family did construction a lot. And so I got called to serve in the Utah St. George mission. And that was freaking stellar. While I was on my mission, we baptized a gentleman, or a gentleman decided to get baptized while we were teaching him. And he was the general manager of a car dealership. Every time we go to this guy's house, this guy was like very well off, I guess he could have been showing off a little bit, but everything on the outside looked like he was successful. And that was towards the end of my mission. And so I got home, I moved back to Iowa, realized very quickly that probably wasn't the best idea, came back out to Utah to be with my then girlfriend, now wife. And right after I got married, I was working construction. I was like, dude, I don't want to do this forever. You know what I mean? So I drove past, this guy hit me up, and I drove past a Honda dealership. And I remember learning from my parents that sometimes you just like have to walk into jobs and like just ask if they're hiring. So I walked into this Honda dealership, asked if they were hiring. They pretty much hired me right on the spot. And that was it, dude. So I cut my teeth in car sales, new car sales. And I was there for about 6 years. And then I stepped out into the more professional sales of like, SaaS, digital marketing, B2B stuff. And that was a ton of fun. But yeah, dude, car sales.
That's crazy. That's actually how I got my first job too. Literally like walked into a retail store and asked if they were hiring. I was like going around town driving because I was getting ready to go to college, and I don't know. I feel like people don't do that anymore, but
no, that's good though.
It's a good way to build some courage and learn how to talk to people.
Yes.
What was the moment? I feel like it's different for everyone because I'm sure when you got into the car sales, you didn't want to do that or you didn't think of yourself as a salesperson.
Yeah.
At what moment did it click for you that you were like, oh, this is a real job. Like this is a real skill. Like I could do something with this.
Yeah. My views on this have changed over time, but I'll explain it to you as it was happening to me, like it was happening to me in real time. And that was when I learned how to close a deal. So I was pretty successful right out of the gate, but it was more like I had that new salesperson energy. I was getting a lot of deals because of my energy, because of my, just the sheer number of people, right? And then there was a winter. And I was like, dude, I'm not selling anything. And things just weren't coming as easy. And I had a mentor who was like, look, dude, you're not like, you're used to them just like closing for, right? Like no sort of way, no persuasion or anything like that. And he's like, you got to learn how to close. And so I worked with him, but then I shamefully picked up Grant Cardone's Closer Survival Guide. Have you ever read that?
I've read like a couple different parts of his books, dude, but
it's
Ultimate Car Salesman book.
Ultimate Car Salesman book. Back in those days, by the way, Grant Cardone was a car salesman. That's how he cut his teeth in sales. So I've known Grant Cardone since he was doing car sales training. Anyway, as I picked up that book, immediately realized that a lot of this was like, dude, no way. There's no way that's going to happen. But a few of them were really, really good. And so I used them and dude, I remember reading one of the closes and going like, oh yeah, I could say that. And then I go out to this guy and we sit at the negotiating table. He's like, I really want to do it, but I just don't know, man. And I remember the close. It was called the Sooner or Later close. And basically it just went like this. Hey, look, I mean, I don't want to push you, but it sounds like you're probably going to do this sooner or later, right? Shouldn't we just get this done so you can spend time on other things that are important? And he just looked at me, looked at the deal, looked at me again, and then just signed it and go, yeah, you're probably right. And that was it, dude. That was it. I was like, holy shit, dude, you can close deals. This is how you close a deal, right? Like, and then, but that was it. That when I learned I could close a deal, right?
Yeah, it's exciting when you can learn how to, I don't want to say negotiate, but you understand that you're equals and you just learn how to like that power dynamic of going back and forth. Yeah. This is just a conversation. And it sounds like I'm sure that's played a big role in your podcasting too, just being able to communicate with people and push on topics that maybe are uncomfortable or just ask questions that are worth asking.
Yeah. Yeah. And dude, really it's a great feeling to know that you can persuade and influence people, and you have the ability and the know-how to do that, right? Because not a lot of people understand that, closing a deal or negotiating is like a skill that you need. But if you can develop it well and you have it, that's it. Like you can go anywhere, grab a sales job, learn the nuances of the gig, and for the most part, overcome any objection, because the objections there's pretty much only 5, right? Whether you're B2B, B2C, there's only a handful. And if you know how to kind of navigate those within your sales category, I think that's powerful, very unstoppable.
For sure. Yeah. And I'm sure you've noticed that I've seen it in my career going through different sales jobs is if you know how to sell one product, it typically translates into other things and like other areas
Yes,
of your
yes.
life, being able to negotiate job offers or negotiate business deals that you're trying to do on the side.
Yeah.
So super, super important. But anyway, you move from Iowa, you get married in St. George, you're doing sales. Um, I want to learn more about podcasts, but also like
Sure, man.
what led you to that? Like what I mean, you started 4 years ago. What
Mhm.
caused you to want to start one?
Yeah, I was slowly transitioning out of car sales and I wanted to get into the professional sale. And, I learned about networking and kind of like it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in college, but it was all online, so I didn't really have a network there. And my schedule was so busy at the dealership. Like retail is when everybody's not working, you're working, right? And when everybody's working, you're still working. So there's really no time outside of the dealership. And because of that, I was like, well, I got to like wean this off. So long story short, I was like, I've got a network. I reached out to like 20 people that I wanted because I'd heard about SaaS. I'd heard about these other things. I'd done some at that point in my career. I was a new car salesman, so I was dealing with credit apps, and I would see these guys selling tech come in, and they were making lots of money, and I was like, but they were here buying a car at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I was like, dude, this is insane. Like you're making this money, and you're here buying a car, and like a nice car, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, dang, I want to get into that, all these things, and so I ended up trying to date people. Like I'd go on LinkedIn or Facebook and be like, hey, can I go buy, can we go grab lunch? Can I buy you a drink? Whatever. And that didn't work. Everybody said no. Like nobody had the time. And so then I go listen to Gary Vee because I love Gary Vee. And he said you have to make a party. You have to have a party where people want to go be at. And so I was like, well, shoot, I want to make and I'd always loved podcasting. Like I'd always thought I had something cool to say. So I was like, well, shoot, I'll, so at the same time, by the way, I've got to put this in there because this is super important. My buddy at the dealership was like, we were both talking. We were like, dude, we got to get out of this thing. Like, I don't want to be a car salesman. Like, I don't want to stay here my whole life, die. And then everybody at my funeral be a bunch of car dudes. Like, you know what I mean? I don't want to do that. So he's like, well, what if we sell something? And I was like, all right, well, what do you want to sell? And he goes, CBD. So my first business, my first entrepreneurial journey was selling CBD online. And I don't know if you know this, but that's probably one of the hardest things to sell e-commerce.
That sounds like a really hard thing to sell online.
You can't run no ads, no Facebook ads, no Reddit ads, no Google ads, nothing. Can't run any ads. You also can't have normal merchants. We lost like 2 or 3 merchant accounts. We lost bank accounts. Like it was the worst thing we could possibly have done. But we were trying to market our CBD company, and I was trying to network to get out of the dealership. So I was like, well, what if I did a podcast where I invited on business owners to network, and the first sponsor of the podcast was Heppius. That was our CBD company. And Heppius was the Greek god of health. So Heppius had daughters like Hygienia, which is where we get the word hygiene from.
Okay.
So anyway, that was the name of it. So if you go back and listen to some of my first episodes, Clayton.
I listened to the first one this morning.
Okay, yeah. So Heppius was like those first ones were all sponsored by Heppius, and we actually got some deals from it. Like we were doing this guerrilla marketing, like influencer marketing, podcast marketing. I would go like I knew 10 buddies who had podcasts back then, and I was just like, hey, can I pay you $50 to put my ad on your podcast? And they were like, dude, what? Yes. So I would just spend like a couple $100 a month putting these, and dude, it worked for a long time. Then my buddy got out of it, and we ended up selling all the inventory off and kind of walking away from that thing. But that's how it started. So I went back to those first 20 people who told me no. Yeah, like I won't go out to dinner with you or whatever. I was like, hey, well, will you come on a podcast and talk to me for an hour? Every single one of them said yes. And that was it. I actually brought on somebody from my podcast. They liked me. They said they were hiring for sales, and that's how I got my first job outside of the car sales.
It's super interesting, the whole party analogy, but
Yeah.
it really does. It provides value for the other person because everyone loves the sound of their own voice. Essentially, like everyone loves their own
Yeah.
story and they want
Yeah.
to feel valued. And even if it's a small podcast, like I'm sure you had at the beginning, where it's like you don't even know if anyone's listening, they don't know that, but
And they
they
don't
know
care.
that for sure. I mean, it's just free marketing for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause
Like one of my first episodes was Chemo Mac, the co-founder of Mobetta.
oh, no way.
And he was episode
That's
12. He stayed he rolled up to my condo in his really nice Audi. His Audi was probably worth more than my freaking condo at the time. Like,
wow.
and he just sat in my kitchen and chatted for. So that was a funny story. So I invite him on. I'm like, dude, I know this guy's powerful, whatever. And I go, okay, I'm going to keep it to an hour. I'm going to ask all my questions, and we're just going to be in and out. And we get to the hour mark, and he's not slowing down. And so I'm like, hey, Chemo, thanks for coming, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, hold on. Stays for 2 hours. That podcast was 2 hours with Chemo Mac. Probably one of the richest guys I've ever interviewed. And just gave it to me for free.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
you can't even buy his time.
No, exactly.
So, okay, for you, it sounds like the start of it was you'd always wanted to do a podcast. You were starting a business, and then you wanted to meet cool people, kind of network to get into B2B. Was there anything like any other reasons why you wanted to do it so bad, or it was just kind of like something you were trying?
No, I think the other reason was it was kind of like a journal for me. So one of the things that I also love about this podcast is if for some reason I pass away, like God forbid. But if I ever left suddenly, I'm not a very good writer. I don't, I've tried to keep a journal. I don't do very well with that. But if I left, my son and my daughter would have over 300 hours of their dad talking. And not only just talking, but being real and authentic. And that's always been kind of special to me, is like they would have that, and it's a journal, and they could, eventually we'll type all these up and do something with them. I don't know, but right now we're just having fun. But yeah, that's one reason for sure.
Dude, that's incredible. So more of a legacy play for you.
Yeah. It's like, you can go back on these and just, I don't know, just look at them. You know what I mean? And just have fun seeing how far you come. But yeah.
That's incredible. So if, let's say I'm a sales rep and I'm interested in starting some sort of podcast, can you like walk me through what the first things you would do if you were starting a podcast over today?
Yeah. I mean, for me, podcasting comes down to like why you want to do it. If you're going to do it, I mean, do it around something that you're at least knowledgeable about or that you want to know about. Or it's kind of like the content play. Like, what should I write about on LinkedIn if I've never written on LinkedIn, right? Well, you could build a public. You could do some kind of journalism where you're like writing about things that you see. You could write about your past experiences. You do all these things. So if I were going to start a podcast over, I would probably pick one. And then what type of podcast do you want? So I like interview style podcasts, like what you have. It's very easy to create content based on an interview. Like if I want 10 podcasts, I'll just find 10 people to interview, right? Whereas if I'm solo, and by the way, I've created solo podcasts, and those are just really hard. It's not my cup of tea, but if you're solo, it's pretty difficult. You've got to script out your episodes. You've got to batch record them, and then you're just talking to yourself. And that's, I don't know. For me, it just wasn't fun. Like I'd rather have somebody else talk. So, pick your style. I would do interview if I was a salesperson, interview style. Okay. Who are the types of people that you want to connect with? I mean, ultimately that's what this play is. If you're in sales, it's like, who do you want to connect with? So if you're in sales and you're selling, you might just pick your company's target market. If I'm selling AI to whoever, right, I'm going to go ask those guys to be on my show. Because when you're that small of a podcast, like unless you have connections to hitters, like unless you know Gary Vee and he'll come on for your show for 5 minutes, it's, you know what I mean? It's like, this should be a networking play. And then just invite them to talk about something that isn't directly related to your business, but is adjacent. So like an accountant wouldn't start an accounting podcast, but they would start maybe a podcast around like just figuring it out, or like Dirty Dough is a good example of this. Dirty Dough has a podcast. Their podcast isn't about cookies or franchising. It's about mental health.
Ooh,
Great.
okay.
Well, that's a podcast topic that everybody can come together on, that everybody has an opinion on, and that you're never going to find a shortage of guests on. Cool. We start a podcast on resilience, right? Like, what are your values? Write those down. Start a podcast around your values. Invite people on that you genuinely want to connect with, that you could have a conversation with, and then press record.
So how did you initially outreach people? Like, how did you find some of your first guests?
Some of my first guests were all people that I knew. So like, I think the second guest was like Jason Laporte. Him and his buddy Zach are the, I think Zach is a part owner in Fierce Fighting. And Jason at the time, they had the biggest MMA podcast in Utah. I just brought them on. Let's just chat, dude.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, a couple other guests, I brought on a guy who, had an MBA in finance and a PhD in psychology. Rich Heido, that was really cool. Just hearing him kind of mix both worlds together was really fun to talk to. But yeah, they were just people that I knew, and people that I knew had a really cool story, because that's always something that I've liked talking to people about, is just get like, tell me your story, man. And then we'd hear their story, and then, hey, do you want to share it on a podcast? Yep. I don't have any followers, and probably 0 people are going to listen to this. My mother is probably going to be the only one that knows who you are after this show. All right. I was like, but I'll give you the whole episode. You can have it, and you can use it for marketing. I'm like, all right.
So okay, what tools do you need to get started? Like, if you said,
yeah,
and maybe we can do 2 situations. Let's say one situation is I'm a sales rep trying to do it on a tight budget. The other one is I'm an executive and I have a bigger budget. What are the 2 different ways that you would allocate those resources?
Yeah, if I were a salesperson, I would jump on Zoom, because that's free. And I would grab my AirPods or a nice mic. So I'd grab like a Rode NT1. That's a USB mic that you can just plug right into your computer. Will give you pretty good audio. It's like $100. And that's all I would use. So I wouldn't worry about editing it. I wouldn't worry about anything like that. I would just do audio at first. And if you want to do the video, don't edit the video. Just use what Zoom has and throw it up there. If you want to spend a little bit of money, you can find somebody on Fiverr who will edit your podcast, for $50 or something like that. But I wouldn't worry about editing it right away. I would just get it out there. So what I might do, instead of like, okay, I got to upload it, and I don't, he's saying not to edit it, but like, who's going to watch an unedited podcast? Well, that's a good point. So here's what I might do instead then. If you don't want to do that, what you can do then is just do like a LinkedIn Live. Go get like a Riverside account or a StreamYard account. I think it's like $10 a month or $20 a month. And then just go live on LinkedIn. Say, hey, do you want to join my LinkedIn Live? We talk about mental health, or we talk about whatever for 30 minutes, and we go live on LinkedIn to our audience. That way you don't have to worry about like editing it or making it nice. Like, everybody knows it's a live show, so it's going to be raw and uncut, and that's what they're expecting. So I would do that. But the equipment wise, you don't need much. Just grab, I'm going to assume that you're a salesperson, so you have a computer. You probably got AirPods. So if you got $100, go grab a little mic that you like from Amazon, and grab a Riverside StreamYard account or a Riverside account or a Zoom account. You can go live on Zoom for $17 a month. So that's what I would do. And then I would just do it like a live thing where you're like, it's kind of like cool anyway. Like, you want to join my live show, dude? Like, that's kind of cool. I've done those before too, and they're great, dude. So that's probably what I would do. That way you don't have to worry about posting it and how do I get it on Apple and all this stuff. Although I can show you how to do all that. It's pretty simple, but I don't know if I'll go through that because it's kind of complicated here. But anybody can email me and ask me. I'll tell them how to do it. And then if you were an executive with a bigger budget, I'd probably do one inside, like I would do an in-person one. So I would grab one camera, I would grab like a camera, like a Sony A7 or a Canon M50 or a Canon R6 or something like that. And I would do a wide angle shot. So I'd grab like a 16 millimeter lens or like a 24 lens or something like that. I would do one wide shot. I would grab two mics, something like the SM7B or and then some boom arms, make a nice background. So if you have these types of mics, you'll need an XLR cable. You'll need a mixer. I like the Rodecaster Pro too. Grab that mixer, grab two SM7Bs and a couple of XLR cables and a boom mic. And then that wide angle shot, you can grab an editor off of Upwork or Fiverr, and that wide shot can turn into your 3 camera shot. So your editor can crop in on you, crop in on your guest, and then go wide, and then just use a multi-camera editor in post and make it look really official, but you only need 1 camera. Like I have 3 cameras and a live switcher, but if I would go back and do it again, I'd probably just get 1 camera and do that. So like when I'm in a bind and I don't have a producer, like somebody to hit buttons for me, I'll do 1 camera and my editor is amazing. And so he just turns it into 3 different shots.
Yeah, no, he does a great job. I've watched a couple of the shows, and the way he goes back and forth, it feels like really good,
Yeah. He's good. So, and he, by the way, he's in the Philippines, pay him $8.50 an hour. So it's not it's not crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would do. So if I had that bigger budget, I'd buy a little nicer equipment and stuff like that. But you can get started, just do a LinkedIn Live thing, dude. But it's for disposable content. So you're going to go on LinkedIn Live and then you're going to keep that content and you're going to turn it into TikToks and grow it,
Yeah, no, I feel like the 2 biggest things that have been helpful for me in like the last 2 months of doing this have been setting up on Riverside and using podcasters. I just barely got a mic. I wish I'd have got a mic way sooner because like the audio in some of them haven't been as like much as I wanted. But Riverside's great because it's literally free up to 2 hours. You can edit it literally there. You can go online and get free music downloads from some, like there's websites you can literally get free music and you just can upload it into the intro and outro.
Well, you know what I did for all of the music that you hear on my show, I bought from local producers, cheaper than royalty. So I get royalty free music. That's the key, right? But I just go find like, dude, Utah has so many creatives. So I'm big in the hip hop scene. I love those. I love that group. Like I know Nate and all those guys who do like the Utah rap battles and stuff, and Dre Rocca and all those guys. So I would just go to my buddy and be like, hey, can you make me an intro, like a 15-second intro, and I'll pay you. Like I get to use it forever, royalty free, give it to me forever. Yeah, like whatever. And I think the most I've ever paid is like $150, but now I give it to my homie, right? Like I'm putting it back into the community. So
that's so cool. Yeah, I'll have to hit you up on that afterwards because I've been trying to find artists. I'm not in that scene, so I don't know anything, but I think it's cool to find local artists. Then you get something with a little different feel.
Well, and it's yours,
and you're able to support, and it's yours.
You're able to, and it's like custom to you. Like, hey, make me my own beat. Nobody else can use, right? Like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So anyway, otherwise you have to like rent anyway, it's stupid. Like I've used like Epidemic Sound and stuff like that and kind of just renting the music. And then when you stop paying for Epidemic Sound, they'll take your stuff off of YouTube. They'll put a copyright hold on it. Dude, it's a nightmare. So I just went back and changed all of it to my homie's music, and that was it, dude.
That's interesting. I didn't know about copyright. I had like royalty free music. I think that's what it was. I went to some website and got royalty free, but it's also like super generic. But
yeah. But there you go. Dude.
Yeah. Dude, I have another question. What's the strangest way that you've either made money through a podcast or heard someone make money through a podcast?
Strangest way? I don't know if there's a
That might be
strange
a hard
way.
one.
Yeah, I don't know
Or
if
like
there's
might
a
be like
strange way, but
interesting.
like out of the box way though, is so the way I've explained a podcast is like a Costco chicken. It's a loss leader. It's the Xbox, right? You buy an Xbox and they make all their money on the games. They lose money on the console and make their money on the game. So that's how I view podcasts. So the most interesting way that I've made money from it as a lead magnet was I interviewed Bennett Maxwell on a podcast, my podcast. He put on LinkedIn, hey, I want to go on podcast. I had a homie of mine said like, hey, go on Dalton's. I reached out to Bennett. I'm like, Bennett, let's do it. So he comes on my podcast and we have a great chat about sales. I'm like, let's talk about franchising. Let's talk about sales. Go for like an hour. And then like 2 weeks later, I get laid off from a SaaS company. And I'm like, dude, what am I going to do? Like, this is crazy. So I post on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, I'm a free agent. Like, where's my next gig? Bennett calls me like almost right away and goes like, hey, I need you to sell franchises for me. Like I've got more than I can handle. Like just sell them. And I worked for him on a contract for a year. And that I was a well over 6-figure year that never would have happened if I didn't have a podcast. So I don't know, like it wasn't directly like I got a 6-figure check for my podcast, but again, like that's not really going to happen for smaller podcasters like us. But what does happen is what I just told you is like I never would have met Bennett. He never would have given me the time of day if it wasn't for a podcast, right? We talk about sales. Basically, that 1-hour interview I did with him was basically a job interview. He's like, dude, we've already talked. I like your style. I've already heard you. I already know you. I don't need if you want it, it's yours. And that was probably the most money that I made because we made a lot of money at Dirty Dough selling franchises.
Well, also, I think people get to know you, right? And so there's so many opportunities for you to connect other people, even past guests. You know, maybe you meet a friend and they say, hey, I have this problem. And you're like, oh, dude, I know somebody that was on my show. Like, why don't you work with them? And then you just become this connector of people.
Do you want to hear a really cool story?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to tell the story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. If they get mad at me, they got my number. They can text me. So, I interviewed Nate Randall from Gab Wireless on my show.
Oh yeah.
Had him on. He was amazing. He actually came on twice. That's a funny story for another time, but he came on twice. I interviewed him. And then a couple months later, I interviewed Nicole Harrop. Do you know her?
I've seen her on LinkedIn.
Yeah, seen her on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she does.
Probably seen her. Yeah. She's got a podcast that's really cool. Shout out to her and her podcast. So I interviewed Nicole live in my studio. We have a great chat. Afterwards, I'm like, hey, whatever you need, let me know. Like we're talking. And at that time, Gab Wireless had put out a article that said over the next 4 years, they're going to add hundreds of jobs to the Utah economy. And Nicole is a leadership consultant. So I go, Nicole, do you know Nate Randall? She's like, of course. I go, you got to talk to him about, some leadership consulting stuff. And she's like, well, I don't know him. Like, blah, blah. I was like, dude, look, I don't know Nate well enough. But I do know that I have a good enough relationship that I can put you in a text thread, and I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee that he's going to say yes or anything like that. But but I'll put you in a thread and let's see where it goes. Dude, imagine getting a leadership consulting with Nate Rand. That'd be insane, dude.
Yeah,
so I put him in a thread. Nate goes, no, I'm good, Nicole. Thank you though. And I go, oh, dang it, dude. So I'm like, sorry. And then 2 days go by and I get this call from Nicole and she's like, hey, I just want you to know that I just landed a consulting gig with Nate because he saw one of my posts and remembered that we talked, and now I'm going over there. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude. So that's like the power of podcasting. Like that's the networking ability, right? Of like just creating opportunity for people and ourselves that wouldn't exist if we didn't appeal to other people's self-interest and invite them on our show, right?
That's a really cool story. We talk about in sales all the time, the power of being able to be in a text thread with somebody.
Yeah.
Like after you sell someone, like I always text them, say, hey, like, let me know if you need anything. Here's my cell number.
Yeah.
And the power that you have to do that, if you know someone well enough to put them in a text thread and say, hey, I know you're trying to work on this. Let me connect you with one of my friends. Like that removes so many barriers. It's not an email. It's not,
right, dude. Right.
It's very personal and intimate. It's like a friend helping a friend. And there's just really cool power behind that.
Dude, and it's amazing. And like everybody who comes on my podcast and everybody who comes on your podcast, one of the ways that I get people on my podcast now who wouldn't otherwise come is like, hey, by the way, here's everybody that I've interviewed and I have good relationships with all of them. So if you come on my show, like you're in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when I texted Nate, I'm like, Nate, you get 1 million of these texts. I don't know if makes sense, but you and Nicole were on my podcast and I couldn't not make this intro. I'll let you two take it from here. Boom. That's it.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. Dude, my life has been forever changed because of podcasting and just the network that I can create because of it. It's incredible how much networking can affect it. And then, how do you kind of like strategically network, is a podcast, man. You get to tell your story. You get to hear their story. You get to create right. We always talk about like relationship selling.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard part, if you just get a salesperson in a normal org, and you're like, it's all about the relationship. You're like, yeah, dude, but I got to make a check next week.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know what to do with this. But if you invite them on a podcast, if you get somebody like this and you have an hour long, like, dude, you and I are going to talk for 45 minutes on this. And we're probably going to be closer than we've ever been before, but just because we've had the opportunity to listen to each other and sit down and take time out of our day. We didn't have to be brothers for 17 years. I didn't have to save your life and grab your hand on Angel's Landing. And now we're home. You know what I mean? Like we just chatted and it's a genuine connection. And that's what you're looking for in sales. You can do both. You can get that genuine connection and relationship in 45 minutes and make it worth it, on the back end, with a podcast, dude. It just makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, no, and I even made a LinkedIn post about this the other day where I said, these are conversations I'm already having. Like I'm already networking with people.
Yeah.
But I think it's an awesome opportunity to put a mic in front of it and share with your friends because, and this is actually something you might agree with, Dalton, but I think the content is a time machine. Like I'm able to share this conversation with 100 other people and that expands the amount of time I have in my life because I don't have time to go have a phone call and catch up with every one of my friends, but I know that they're all interested in this conversation. So what do I do instead? I say, hey man, I know we haven't caught up in a while, but go listen to this episode. You'll hear a little bit of what's going on in my mind and you'll hear a really cool conversation with a new friend I just made.
Yeah, dude. And by the way, as a because we're both actively salespeople.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, I think it's cool because I've had this happen multiple times where I'll like be selling in my normal job and they'll know who they're meeting with because it's like, hey, you got a meeting with Dalton, you got a demo with Dalton, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they'll jump on and they'll be like, dude, you're the guy. You're from the podcast. They're like, oh my gosh, dude, are you going to interview me? And it's so fun. Yeah. Like they know you before you even get on the call. And every sales guru loves to talk about that, right? Like, how are you going to not prospect? Cold calling's dead. Cold email's dead. Like you just want your prospects to know you. Every other way other than podcasting I have found is total BS. Like other than podcasting, every other way is total crud.
It's a huge lead magnet.
Yeah, and they just know you.
Does so much for brand.
Yeah, and they feel like they've been talking to you forever. Like I had one client say, "Dude, I feel like I've known you forever." How powerful is that in a sales conversation?
Yeah,
to already have that level of like, hey, okay, cool. So we can just skip all this, right? We're homies. We can just have a conversation. If it works, sweet. If it doesn't, even better, right? Like, dude, you
Well,
have
and
so much cool stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
it's interesting too, Dalton, because I mean, you and I have texted and we've chatted like a decent amount, right? Like I feel like I know you pretty well, but I feel like I know you even better just because I listened to your podcast. And it's like I feel like we've had conversations that we haven't had just because I've listened to your conversations, right?
Yeah, dude, it's been awesome, man.
But here, I know we're coming up on time. One other question I wanted to ask you though is, at least for me, like I look at sales as an engine to get into entrepreneurship, and I look at myself in 3 to 5 years from now being able to find someone to either buy or build a business. Is that kind of like a similar vision you have, like looking forward? Like, is that how you? Because I know you're currently running a sales team for a SaaS company. Are you using that to fuel more entrepreneurship things, or do you have a lifelong passion to be in sales? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, man, I've done the entrepreneur thing, and it's beautiful, but it's so dang hard. For me, what I want to do, and I was actually just thinking about this today, but is be more creative, is take my entrepreneurial journey and more creativity. Like be more, create more content, create more cool things. So like doing this emotional resilience thing, one thing that might happen, might not happen, is we might pause the thinking project and actually go on an emotional resilience kind of like interview tour. Like we'd interview like 60 to 100 people, different people on emotional resilience. Write a book, make a course, go on a tour. So much like that's what I'm thinking about, like a real journalism kind of like documentary thing. So because what does entrepreneur mean? Buy a business, yep. Start your own, yep. Create a community around a value that you have and start a nonprofit, yep. Have you ever met a nonprofit owner? Those guys are hustlers, and they make money. Like you don't run a nonprofit for free, right? But anyway, so like all of these things. So like I'm thinking like something like that too, of like, if I can get out of sales, it would be because of, these opportunities that I kind of create for myself through podcasting and through interviewing and through creating, communities and content. So that's kind of my view of how I want my entrepreneurial journey to look.
I gotcha. So it sounds like you want to continue to find ways to be creative through your sales career.
Yeah.
And then use that to fuel more of like the passion projects on the side of building a community around emotional resilience and training the youth, or
or just,
being able to give back.
Yeah. Being able to give back. And I think that is, I mean, that's just as entrepreneurial as anything else. Right. So, anyway, but yeah, I think
like you don't have to run a business. You don't have to run a business to be an entrepreneur, right? Like there's other ways that you can...
or a traditional business, like, but yes, you're totally right. I think I've learned that over my 300 plus interviews. Because entrepreneurship looks different for everybody, right?
Dude, I love that. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. Hope to have you on here sometime in the future. Maybe when I pass 300 episodes.
Let's go, dude. Let's go. I'm here for it, man. I'll be there the whole way.
Cool. Thanks, Dalton.
Yeah, absolutely, brother.